Amanda Leitner, and welcome to Rochester Rising, where we amplify the stories of Rochester entrepreneurs. Welcome to episode 211 of the podcast. So Rochester Rising, both our podcast and our online storytelling platform, launched over 4 years ago. And the goal was to tell stories that weren't being told about entrepreneurship, innovation, and creative business development taking place in Rochester, Minnesota. We release a new podcast every Wednesday, talking with a different entrepreneur and learning about their journey. In addition to the podcast, we release a new article every Thursday with that same entrepreneur, just showcasing a short snippet of the conversation in the podcast. So you can check it out there before or after you listen in to learn more stories of entrepreneurship and innovation taking place here in our community. So thanks so much for sharing some of your time with us today. And we hope you can each take away something from this conversation to apply to what you're thinking about or what you're growing here in the Rochester community or anywhere else. On the podcast today, I got to have a wonderful conversation with local creative innovator Amarilys Henderson. This entrepreneur was born in Puerto Rico, but really lived all over the U.S. and the world, including spending time in Dallas, D.C., Savannah, and China before moving to Rochester with her family. Amarilys always had an interest in art, which was spurred by her love for Disney movies. In the conversation today, we talk about her journey with art and her time spent with animation, illustration, print design, surface design, and painting, plus the evolution of what she calls her watercolor devotionals and her new book coming out this spring. So stay tuned for this really fun conversation with Amarilys. So as I mentioned, a brand new Rochester Rising podcast comes out every Wednesday. You can listen in wherever you prefer to consume podcast content, including straight from our website at rochesterrising.org. You can also listen in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel. So check it out. We have over 211 episodes for you. So there's something for everybody. So check back in with past podcasts, future podcasts, and we hope you subscribe and continue to listen in. Rochester Rising is the storytelling arm of the nonprofit Collider, which is a Rochester-based organization that supports early-stage entrepreneurs. You can learn more about Collider and what we have to offer to the community at collider.mn. All right, so now we'll launch right into today's conversation with Amarilys Henderson. Well, yeah, no, I appreciate your time on this evening. It's actually, I was thinking when I was walking in my house, it's incredible how much it warmed up today. I feel like it was minus 10 this morning, and now it's like close to 40 degrees. It's amazing. So weird.
I haven't been outside. I see the sunshine and I'm like, I should really go for a walk and take advantage of that because I'm going to feel it tomorrow if it's not around. But
I think it's actually still going to be nice tomorrow. But
okay,
yeah,
good.
Just weird things, but living in the upper Midwest, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you gotta take advantage for sure.
So I wanted to start out by learning more about you. So would you mind sharing where you're from, some hobbies, interests, basically what makes you, you?
Okay. Well, I am Amarilys. I think starting off with my name is a fitting way to begin because it's spelt in Spanish and misspelt. So it is a flower that you'll see around Christmas time. But I was born in Puerto Rico. My family's Puerto Rican. My parents divorced. And so actually I came to the States and would spend my summers in Puerto Rico. And so I've always had that kind of mixed upbringing, not ever feeling like one place is home. And I used to see that as such a negative, and now I appreciate that. I have always been interested in art. People ask me what my hobbies are, and I can tell you what I'll do on a Friday or Saturday night if everything is, just right for me. We would go salsa dancing. We would eat good food. I'd have a glass of wine, and I can tell you that, how I like to have a good time. But really, when it comes down to when I have free time, I pretty much just do the same thing, and I just paint. Part of the reason is because I paint for all the reasons. So I paint for work, I paint for fun, and I paint when I'm having big feelings, and I paint as part of my Christian devotion time. So that's a lot of painting. So my poor boys, I have 2 boys in 3rd and 5th grade now, and they just think that I'm painting all the time, and that's just what I do. That's about it. It's a really quick introduction.
I think that's super fair. I think when you find something you're like really passionate about and it's just your outlet for everything, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially when you start doing it for work, then you also have to make time for it to be fun and to kind of nurture that creative part of you if it's not getting that.
Yeah, that's really true, because you're kind of, probably commissioned to do some stuff, which I'm sure we're going to talk about more, but you have things that you have to do, but then you have to do some things for yourself. So it's kind of finding that balance and making sure that you're still finding that connection and that passion and kind of driven to do it. So I think that
Totally.
I very much understand that. I've had that same experience with writing where you start to not like it because of all that you have to do with it. That paid the bills. So you got to do that. So you went from Puerto Rico to now Rochester. So how did you get here, and what kind of keeps you in the community?
Yeah, I've lived in a few places between then and now. Lived in the DC area, in Atlanta and Chicago, Dallas. Went to school in Savannah, Georgia, and went back to Dallas, got married. We lived in China, and now we're back here in Minnesota. And by back, it's my first rodeo. It's my first time in Minnesota, but I've only been here. I actually have been, what I was thinking is I've been here for a while, almost 8 years now, but my husband is from here. So he was born and raised in Rochester, went to Mayo High, and I told him to never make me move here, and here we are. But it was all, I actually accepted or even expected to move to Rochester well before he did. So it's kind of funny when we were moving back from China, we were just caught in this limbo, and he was looking for work everywhere. So we met in art school at the Savannah College of Art and Design. And so I'm the art, he's the design, and he does industrial design. He was looking for work it was narrowed down to having second interviews in Ohio, Kansas City, and Shanghai. And then I think just a week or 2 later, it ended up being Rochester. So the process for him starting to work at Benchmark went fast. And during that transition time, we were actually living with his parents. So we were already in town. We had a 3-4-year-old at the time, hadn't adopted our second. So we have one biological, one adopted. And I was just kind of like, okay, let's do this. And I've come to really enjoy Rochester. There have been moments when we've thought about moving, and I've realized that I would be trying to replicate what I have here elsewhere, except for the weather part. But everything else will be just about the same as what I already have. So pretty grateful for it.
So it wasn't one of those, we're only going to be here for a few months, and it turned into a few years. You knew you were going to be here for a while.
I think that's how it happens. Yeah. I've heard a lot of residents say the same thing. But I think, and I think that's just kind of how it happens in general, right?
Definitely. You think you're only going to do this thing for a little bit of time, and then it ends up being, you just stay. And like you said, you'd basically I felt the same thing. I was going to be here for 7 months. It's been 14 years this summer.
Great. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, you just, like you said, there'd have to be a pretty good reason to leave at this point. And you'd have to replicate basically everything, that you had here, which would be a huge challenge. Could be done, but, then there's that next level of barrier.
Yeah. And then is it worth it? Right? Why?
Exactly. I would like some nicer weather too, but the silver linings, right? Silver linings. So I wanted to understand more about your journey with art. So how did you originally get started? How has that kind of changed over time? And you lived in a lot of different places too. So has that kind of inspired your journey with art as well?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was that girl definitely sitting in the back of the classroom with a sketchbook, and teachers didn't bother me too much about it because my grades were okay. So that was me, and then I got into theater for I don't know, for a few years. But my journey with art, it's just when I feel like it's a bit of a common story. Loving Disney movies, Mom, I want to do that. And she tells me, we were actually living in Atlanta at the time, and she tells me, there's a school actually not far from here that's the best. And I signed up for only the best art school, even though I'm not real sure that there aren't other contenders. I'm a little wiser by now, but that was really the only application I filled out. And I moved from animation to illustration pretty quickly when I realized how much work was put into animation. And I'm glad I did, because I would have had to relearn how to animate differently by now anyway. And I also just love that illustration's so flexible. I can be anywhere. Now, when I went to school, illustration was basically children's books, maybe medical illustration, maybe some posters, some commercial art from time to time. But I wasn't aware of what I'm working in now. And that came with time. As that industry grew, then I grew to learn about it. But my journey going back to college, I did some freelance illustration work, did some books. And when I was going to get married, my mom gave me the good advice that maybe I should have some stable work to cut down on some of the conflicts of early marriage.
That's a total mom thing.
And so I went into print design, graphic design. I remember I interviewed, and they asked me, do you know Illustrator? And I was like, yeah. I mean, I knew it okay. I wasn't really prepared to work in it. But they were like, great, we have this problem. Can you come right over? And I had to go to somebody's cubicle and tinker around in their files and figure out what problem they were having. And I passed the test and I got the job. So I worked in print design for a couple of years while freelancing still. But I kind of burnt out creatively because I became so focused on the finished product, which is what graphic design is about. I mean, when I do graphic design work from time to time, I will tell a client, don't worry, I'm a yes man. I understand that, what you want, and I will do it, but I'll do it better, and hopefully than what you expect. But that kind of grind, wore me out. And when I would approach the paper to paint, I just felt like I couldn't do anything. So I didn't do very much art. And this was actually when we moved to China. And I would do it as some sort of like emotional release. And it was never great work. It was just me feeling through paints. And I didn't start really painting again until I had my firstborn son. That's when I really lost sense of who I was, and I needed to paint again. So, and I needed to paint fast. I had to paint within nap time. And I started combining my devotion time. I would read the Bible, I would pray, I would sing, I would just try to recall again who I was, other than a nursing mom that rolled over every few hours. And I remember I'd walk out of the office that we had, a guest bedroom really, and my husband would, he's a little concerned, and he was like, "Oh, what did you do in there?" and I that's when I kind of made up the word. I just did a watercolor devo. So it was just me bringing watercolor, which is a fast, kind of a natural go-to for me. I didn't respect it very much early on because it wasn't cool. It's cool now, so yay. And then combined it with my devotion time. So I just say, I did watercolor devo, kind of like, get off my back. It's awkward. And over time I started sharing those, and then that became prints, and that became an Etsy shop. And then that became, how did you do that on Instagram? A few YouTube videos. And then I looked into how to really teach. And that's when I found Skillshare and started teaching just 5 years ago. But through all this at the same time, I was also approaching companies to do licensing work. And so the industry that I was talking about earlier is called surface design. And it's basically art that goes on stuff, art that covers surfaces. It could be a pattern, so it could be fabric. It could be a tablecloth. You walk into TJ Maxx, you're going to start noticing that there's art on every kitchen towel and every plate and mug. And
I'm looking around right now.
Yep. That's what I do. You know, you see a cat on a mug, and you're like, I don't know, I just have to have this mug because of this cat. And a lot of holiday, and that's okay with me. I can listen to Christmas music all year round. No problem.
Yeah, I was actually, when I was, doing a news search for you, I came across, my mind is blanking, wrapping paper.
Yeah.
Wrapping paper on like one of the top Minnesota gifts or something, list or something. So that's what surface design is. See, I did not know that.
No, that's okay. And I mean, I still call it commercial art because it's, I don't know, maybe I'm too old school, but also I think surface design, it sounds, I don't know. I feel like it lost the art part, I guess, is my problem with it. But anyway, yeah, you're talking about Minnesota Monthly. That was fun. And I actually got those printed in Rochester from Fran's Graphics. So it was fun to produce wallpaper. Sell it.
Yeah, I think that sounds, quite a journey. Yeah. Quite a kind of exploration and, exploring different avenues. Yeah. So can you dive a little bit more into kind of those different revenue streams that you kind of built up for yourself that you were talking about there? Because I would imagine too, like trying to find, like landing a surface contract or commercial art deal is probably really challenging to do. So can you dive more into some of these things that you've kind of built up over time for people listening who might have similar aspirations?
Yeah. And when it comes to kind of different income streams, I used to think that that was a sign of weakness, that I'm not doing well enough in this area, so I've got to diversify and do all these different things and wear all these different hats. And it can be a fail if it's not you. If you're not actually enjoying it, then why are you setting up your life to kind of get more and more into this industry, right? So it does take a bit of dabbling. I remember when I had the Etsy shop, and some of these things were just kind of by mistake in a way. It was someone asked for something. I was in China. I needed to figure out how to get it into their hands in the States. And I did. And then we had to figure out, payment or whatever. And so I started that shop, and it wasn't like, I'm going to do this. So some of these were stumbled upon, but I remember at that point, I had a preschooler, and my husband, Ryan, had started working full time again. And I remember thinking, if I can just make, at that time, it was $700 a month, I'm going to make it. We can make this. And I remember for months, and probably longer than that, it took a long time to get to that point. And then when I fulfilled that goal, I remember thinking just kind of the power of, so I proposed to do this and it worked out. It doesn't always, right? But there is something about making that intention. And that's when I saw the demand starting to increase for learning to paint. And I look at my earlier videos, and I can't stand watching them, but people still watch them. And that's so I don't take them down, but it was definitely a learning process. And so I started to look at different ways that I could teach online. People ask me, did you consider YouTube? And I did throw a couple of things up on YouTube, but I never really thought that would pan out, because I knew that you needed to be somewhere well into, I don't know, astronomical numbers before you can monetize YouTube. And, fair enough. But I was, not, I was not patient enough for that. So I started looking at other platforms. And there are just all these teaching platforms. I found Skillshare, and I just felt like, for lack of a better expression, I just felt like I liked the vibe. Mm-hmm. Lynda.com felt really stale to me. Other course places, they felt too salesy. Like, buy this course. And I just didn't jive with it. And I saw also that there was a bit of a hole in what I could offer. It wasn't saturated quite yet. There were only 2 other watercolor teachers. And I thought, okay, well, this is a risk in that either these people aren't here and they're not looking here, or I could, offer something that they don't have very much of. So I was fortunate in that respect. With surface design, it was as I started to get interested in all things art, I just was consuming all the podcasts, all the blogs, all the Facebook groups, and that's all I had to learn from. I remember, was it Vine videos or longer? Oh, Periscope. Watched a lot of Periscope interviews, and there are some bigger game players that basically just teach you, hey, you can make a career from art. And I took a couple of those classes, but really what I learned the most from was getting an agent. And so I read a blog about how to get an agent, and it was 5 years old, and I still recommend it now because what I did was I looked at her list of agencies, and I went to their websites, and I kind of like ranked them like green, yellow, red. Like, I would really like this one, or this one's okay, it would be okay. And it was just based on the other artists that they had and in what company I'd be in and what kind of stuff they did, right? So some agencies are focused on more traditional art, a lot of, it's funny because I could describe my work the same way. So using words is kind of hard, but harvest themes, right? So you've got like a lot of fall leaves and the kind of design that you see on paper plates at Hobby Lobby. And not a diss there, but that was like all they had. And I thought, I want something else. I want more variety. So I ended up with an agency that honestly didn't leave a lot financially, but I got the expertise. So it was like I was getting paid a little bit for learning the ropes. And so, you count some things as your tuition or if you're lucky enough, you get to get paid, but it's not what you really deserve. And so I cut the contract when it was time. What was difficult is that I couldn't, I had to be cold for a year, which meant that I couldn't contact those clients. I could look for new work, but I had to be pretty careful how I would tread. So, and I couldn't use any existing work. So I used that year in the dark to create a lot of artwork. And I saved up and went to my first trade show. These surface design trade shows typically happen once a year. There's maybe a handful of different ones. Some focus more on like apparel, textiles, or home decor, or greeting cards, the stationery show. And I went to those trade shows and I tried to shake as many hands as I could, and then built up my little black book from there, from that and LinkedIn.
Yeah. It's all about finding that network, right? And leveraging it. And I'm sure finding an agent, like you said, they take such a big cut. I can't even imagine, I know even the only thing I really know much about is, wholesale and retail selling. And most people don't appreciate that, when a small food producer goes into a store, the actual store takes 40 to 50% of the sticker price. And
Wow.
it sounds unfair until you think about, well, it kind of is, but you're basically buying the eyes of their customer, so
Yeah.
do you want to make the sale or do you not want to make the sale? That's kind of what it comes down to, but it had to be really, really trusting to find somebody to, help get your name out there and finding that right fit, like you said, that had a lot of the style that you fell into instead of, what else you see out there. So it had to be a very, very challenging decision to come to.
It was, and it's hard no matter at what stage you're at to send those emails out, to make those cold calls. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I don't think, the thing is that as much as we can teach best practices, they're as best as we know. And so I imagine that these agencies are receiving all kinds of different inquiries, maybe a really long email with a couple of images, maybe some people include these massive PDFs. And again, it was kind of a stab in the dark, but I tried to be a little calculative about it, in that, I went for the ones that I really wanted first and kind of moved down the line. The waiting game is definitely real. It's hard, but it makes you tough because you're going to have to keep selling whatever it is that you're offering over the span of your business, no matter what you do. If I still had an agent, I would still go to these trade shows and shake hands and sell my work and sell other artists' work. So it's good to just get that out of the way, because it's not going to get any easier to put yourself out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you do a lot of teaching. Where did you find kind of that passion? Did you always want to teach, or what did you see the opportunity and the need to share that skill set with others?
Yeah, it still feels a little bizarre to call myself a teacher, because when people ask me to teach a workshop or something, I'm like, I don't know. I do them only, very sporadically, but it's not like it's something that just jumps out of me. Yet I can talk to a camera by myself here in my studio pretty comfortably. And so that's how I found, like, oh, okay, well, I can do this. The tech part is the hard part, the tricky part. I've recorded classes where the audio did not work at all. It was just such a total waste of time. It was awful. I've recorded ones that I look back on and I'm like, that was whatever. But it's not something that comes naturally, but I do find myself in a bit of a pattern where if someone asks me, how did you do that? The next time I do it, I'm hearing myself talk in my head and I'm narrating how I'm doing it. So the best time to teach is actually not when you have arrived, whatever that means, and you're a master. It's actually good to teach when things are fresh in your mind, when you just learned something and you remember what it feels like to not know how to do that thing, so that you can bridge the gap between how to do it and, to go from I couldn't and now I can. And so I appreciate that this platform I can, and really if I wanted to teach on my own website, which I do have some courses there too, those are a little more in depth. But with the Skillshare classes, it's just like, hey, you want to do a reindeer? Let's do a reindeer. Done. And they're a little more complex than that. But the gist of it is that discovery, that moment. And so if I think of it that way, I like to teach. But when I think of it as teaching, I don't know. I mean, right now I'm teaching my kids at home, and I am very much in tune with the fact that I don't want to be a teacher. That's just not my bag. So, yeah, that's how I frame it, at least.
I think that's a good way to put it. And I think, a lot of, at least like when I was going through elementary school, middle school, high school, it was more about like memorization than like actually like applying. So I love that idea of the discovery and like stretching your limits to like achieve something and understanding what's in yourself. So I really love that way of thinking about it.
Yeah. Uncovering I can do that. I remember, I never did birds before. I tried a couple of birds and I didn't do very well. And I just thought I don't want to say that anymore. So I kept trying at it. And then I discovered, oh, okay. I kind of like broke the code, whatever that meant for me. And that feeling, like being able to help somebody else have that feeling, is pretty fun. I can get behind that.
It is like super challenging too, though. Like, are you recording the video and the audio completely yourself? Do you have any help? Like, does your husband come in and like set up the camera, or are you doing this like all yourself?
My husband wants to help, but he just does not have the time. And so whenever I have contracted help, he's just like, but I can do it. Like, when are you going to do it? When you're keeping the boys away from the space? I do get help from time to time. Most of what I do is myself, especially, I mean, it's all about planning. So you can bring others into your vision if you have a really laid out, clear vision. And so a lot of us don't work that way, or maybe don't work in advance enough. So I will hire if I am really feeling self-conscious about my setup and I want to be lit well. The last class I just did was yesterday with a couple of guys here. And the reason I asked for help was because it was about setting up your studio space, your creative space, how your surroundings in your creative space affect your mental, metaphorical, emotional, creative space. And so I was using my hands and I was grabbing things, and it wasn't like a step-by-step, okay, we're going to do this, camera over my desk, camera at my face. I like to have both angles. It's something that I feel like, you just want to connect as much as you can. And I think we understand that now in this COVID era, right? Like, we don't love Skype, but it's the best we can do. So we'll use what we can. So I'm used to that setup. But when I get beyond that, or I start to feel a little uneasy, yes, I ask for help.
So you have a book coming out this spring, right?
Yeah.
Drawing and painting expressive little animals. I had to make sure I got that right. Super,
you
super
asked
cool.
Me to say it. I can say it.
Looks super cute and
thank you.
Complex for me. But can you talk a little bit about what the book is, and talk a little bit about how did you publish that here in the community? What was that process like?
Last year, I published my first book, Drawing and Painting Expressive Little Faces. And so this year, in 2021, I'll release Drawing and Painting Expressive Little Animals. And I want to go straight to expressive little faces, expressive little animals. That's how we will regard them here on out. Backtracking, one of my Skillshare classes got somebody's attention, and they said, hey, we want you to pitch this as a book. And I thought, cool. I never thought about that. And I never knew how to meet you kind of people. Right. So that was a great break. It didn't happen. And yet what I'm finding is when I have a setback like that, I just think, you know what, I want to do it myself. And so I was just on the lookout for a publisher that I would like that could publish my content. And I pitched it as, hey, I already have it laid out. If you want to see how I teach, if you want to see the principles, if you want to see an outline, it's all here. And then I will supply that. If you ever do want to pitch a book, it's really not that complicated. You need to have a table of contents, kind of your index, your outline laid out, an excerpt of your writing, and then, things about you, the author bio, that sort of thing. Of course, it is harder, to hear if you get accepted. You don't hear back if it's a no. And so it's like, I don't know, dating in the wild. It's just, you don't get
no idea what happened. Yeah.
But I have, I have to credit an app that I use that helps me remember to follow up with people because it's hard enough to get that out there, but then to a month later say, hey, remember me? I have to set up those reminders or else I won't do it. And so Expressive Little Faces was a Skillshare class before it became a book. And it's even hard for me to call them the same thing because it is so different to write than it is to just talk and teach the way that I do. It's a lot easier to do the second one, I think, than to sit down and write. What would you say, Amanda? Because your wheelhouse is writing.
Yeah, and I also teach. So that's a good question, because what you said before totally resonates with me, is that you need to be closer to like the start or gaining competence of the task than further along, because when you're further along, you can't break it down. Mm-hmm. So I guess I do. I actually think teaching is easier as well, or maybe more enjoyable for me, because I like to see that progression. But it can also be really challenging too, or frustrating, even for like the teacher, quote unquote, because you're frustrated when you see people get frustrated and give up on themselves. And I see that a lot. And you see it enough that the trajectory is going to go back up, you hope. Most of the time it does. But I guess it's more interactive. So we were talking about being introvert. So maybe that's one of my like strategic extrovert where I want to, connect with the person and see.
Well, I think you're just more emotionally invested when you're teaching, and when you're writing, you're not. And so that can be exhausting because you're kind of feeling these reflected feelings back at you. And you're also exhausted because you are emoting right now as I'm talking, versus if I were typing it, I'd type a smiley face. Is my face smiling? No, but I'm smiling in my heart, right? It's different. It's exhausting. But what I find exhausting about writing is I feel that lack of momentum. And so I joke, I told my husband, I can see why authors need some log cabin in the middle of nowhere. I get it, because one, distractions, and two, you kind of can adapt more to the pace of writing. I don't care how quickly you type, just getting those thoughts into some real words. I type and I remind myself, and I'm dating myself I remind myself of Doogie Howser and how he would write in his journal at the end of an episode. And it's like, backtrack. No, okay, I meant to write it this way. Delete, do. So we're going back and forth on the line. And that's what I find hard after so many hundreds of words. Where are we at? What page is this by now? And actually, I say that in this animals book, because I knew that about myself. I created a lot of different documents instead of having one massive one. And so it's broken down. The book is broken down into more tutorials than Faces was. Faces had a lot of theory because we were kind of putting together what I called a salad bar. So you've got like your base, which is like the shape of the face, and you select, do I want this kind of vegetable or whatever, and you start building your face. With the animals book, there's so many different kinds of animals. I could not approach it the same way. And so what I did was I broke them into groups. So groups of 3. So 3 animals, let's say wild beasts. And we do, I don't think that's even what it's called, but elephant or lion, and 3 of the same kind. You get the idea. And then we do the tutorials for that. So I did each one of those sections in its own Word document. Well, it turns out I wrote 2 books last summer. And it was so painful to have to cut some. But the publisher was nice enough to put it together still as a book, but these are going to be digital downloads for pre-orders to help people, incentivize them to really essentially get the whole book or get 2 books. So, yeah, isn't that funny? I do find it hard to write, and yet I guess that's just the whole principle of breaking things down into smaller chunks. How do you eat an elephant? That whole idea, a little bit, and then you're just like, I did that thing. Yes, I have 30 more to do after today, but I did the one, and we're going to keep going. So,
yeah, I totally get that. I think to me, the concept of like writing a book, when you think about it as the entirety, is very overwhelming. But if you break it down into little chunks, and I was actually listening, I can't remember now if it was a book or a podcast or whatever, I can't remember, but the creative process, it's not like you're sitting down and looking at this from like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. It doesn't work that way. You're doing a little bit, you need to walk away, and
right.
Maybe you're going for a walk. Maybe you're making dinner. Maybe you're, I don't know, whatever, just being. You're still processing and creating and trying to like make those connections to whatever you want to see develop. So it's requires, you were saying, a lot of emotional energy too to get to that end point and time. So the log cabin in the woods thing, people do that for a reason, because they need that space, they need that time, and they need that removal from distractions.
It doesn't call to me. I'm an ocean lover, but and then if you put me by the ocean, I'm not going to write. So there's that. Yeah, but I get that.
I've always grown up around water, and being this whatever, Sembra River is not water. So I do miss that. And yes, also loved I grew up more on, I guess it's more mid-Atlantic. It's not considered East Coast, but yeah.
Oh.
Loved the water, loved the coast. That is one thing. If I were ever to move, it would have to be by some large body of water for sure.
Yeah. Nice.
That is something I'm definitely missing. So people can pre-order on your website then, right?
Yes. And I mean, I'm not going to spout off links. It's just probably easier to go to my website and figure that one out. It's right in front of you, books. But yeah, the first 100 pre-orders I'm signing, and that'll take a little rigmarole to make sure the books are here and then they're sent back, but it'll be fun. It'll be worth it. And then with this content, how many animals is that? I'm thinking at least a dozen animal paintings that didn't make the book. To get that as a digital download, I think, is a huge bonus. And once they're gone, they're gone. I don't think they're going to be resending those out as free content for anybody who wants it. So
it has to be a really gratifying, amazing feeling to see this thing coming out and, making more than one book too, and having all these other forms of it.
It is fun. It's surreal. What's really fun is like seeing pictures of, I found it at Barnes & Noble, and, someone in Atlanta or whatever. Or I actually, someone emailed me through my website, and she's here in Rochester, and she's like, I read your bio because I picked up your book and you're in Rochester. I about fell off my chair. And I thought, yeah, that would be kind of a weird experience.
Did they find the book in Rochester or no? Or no, you said
I don't know. It's on Amazon. So if you just search my name, granted, then you got to spell it right, which can be tricky. Then you can see all my books there, pre-order or order. But you'll need to then head back to my website to show that you pre-ordered, because the publisher would like to know your order number and make sure that you qualify for all the benefits.
Well, I will wrap up with some final questions here. Hopefully some fun ones.
Cool.
So my goal for this year is to really work on my mindset, especially being positive, because I tend to be more of a negative person.
That's okay. You're creative. You're allowed to have some of that melancholy. That's just in your
good. Do you have any strategies, or how do you deal with mindset in your day-to-day in your work?
Yeah. being a solopreneur can be very lonely. And I mean, I love being a hermit. Like I said, I have to shove myself out the door. I loved grocery deliveries before COVID. That's just, I'm such a hermit, but it gets me sometimes. And so I have to be intentional in plugging into communities, even if it's just online. And I've learned so much. I mean, just by overhearing a conversation, right? You pick up on things and you kind of figure out how the world works. And listening to a podcast like that, I mean, like this, it just, you see the world a little differently. In the morning, I get up and I crumble here in front of my space heater. And I've thought about having a chair, but I really just crumble. So I'll just stay on my rug. It almost looks like a little mat, like this is my spot. It's my little worn out spot. And that's where I get my heart and mind right. I think, no one parades around with a banner that you're doing great. You're doing things right. I know it was a rough day, but you had these wins. You have to remind yourself of those things. And so you have to be quiet enough to remember that. It doesn't just pop up. What pops up is all the negativity for sure. So nothing that you've never heard about, right? Like community. Some people might call it centering yourself. For me, like I said, I'm a Christian, so it's my time with God and believing that I am kind of like his paintbrush. Like these aren't my creations. I am a conduit of creativity, and what a responsibility and honor that is. And then just thinking practically, I've done a lot more annual planning this year than I've ever done. And it's really actually been surprising to me that it relieves the pressure more than giving me pressure. So I have like certain things that I want to do this year. And instead of thinking about them constantly, I know that, okay, well, I put that down for June. I'll deal with it then. And when you look at, I'm a big believer on kind of observing yourself. And you were talking about how your energy levels change and how the creative process is like life encompassing. And how could you ever charge for that, by the way? Because another obscure reference, the movie The Firm with Tom Cruise. I actually watched it recently for the first time. And he gets hired and his boss is like, you think about the client in the shower, you pick up the phone. I want that time. We charge for all that time. And I'm thinking, wow, what a whopping invoice.
What a bill. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I actually have not seen that movie either. So
funny. I've been into 90s movies and I think I'm just kind of like needing to be in a different decade right now.
I actually just watched total sidebar, but yeah, I saw that Sabrina the Teenage Witch was back on TV. Oh. So now I on Fuse or some weird network, I binge watch it now. And then I watch the old 90s movie of it. And I'm funny. Oh my God, this would never get recorded today.
Yeah. Then so you start seeing things that you're like, ooh, that is not sensitive. Not
just
nice.
The way they have high school students interact. They were mean. No wonder I was terrified of in high school because I thought everyone was awful.
Yeah. and like the siblings in Home Alone, right? They're so mean to each other. And I'm like, boys, you can't be like that.
But no, I totally get it. Sometimes you need that escape of back to a different time. And even just the way they told stories, that would never happen today. That stuff would not make it on TV anymore.
No. And some is good and some is a little sad, but anyway, that's another topic. I was talking about how if you watch yourself, I realized in the morning, I'm kind of in a certain mode, and my most productive time is 10 to noon. It stinks that is when my kids are the most productive as well. So I get to, step into that role for now. But then, on Tuesdays, I'm feeling more ready to get creative. Whereas Mondays, I'm thinking about all the things that I didn't do last week. And so that's kind of not a catch up, or maybe a catch up or a beginning of this week. Got to seize the week. And so if you kind of monitor those swings, you can set up your schedule that way so you're not fighting against yourself constantly, because it's not the fighting that's hard. It's the exhaustion that comes from it. So then you lose just the enthusiasm to come back at it the next day. So as much as I can, and I mean, I can't control life, but as much as I can, I try to place things in those kind of swings that I know I'm going to have. Like, I know that Fridays, I know that I always underquote how long something's going to take. So I try to keep Friday clear on my schedule, because that's catch up. That's like, oh, I didn't know I'd need Friday, but there, I have to, this is bled into that day. Just things like that.
I love that idea of like centering yourself and quieting down everything so you can understand those things. I have not arrived at that level.
It sounds near impossible, but I've also been thinking a lot about habits and how, like, turning on my space heater, turning on this light. Like, there's something about, like, you are preparing yourself to do something, and you do certain things before that. And that's, I don't know, those are like little triggers. So maybe work on those triggers and maybe it'll come more easily.
Yeah. So we're mid-January, New Year's. Do you have any winter traditions, New Year's traditions, anything like that really kind of call to you that you try and do?
Ooh, traditions. Don't do resolutions, not because they're passe, but because I forget about them. I don't do a word because I just kind of feel like I'm too complicated for one word.
It's so hard. Like, it's so hard to think of a word. Yeah.
Yeah. One day, this word that's totally it. And then, the next day I'm like, I don't know, this other word. What do I do? Like I said, I'm looking at the annual calendar, and especially when, you'll start noticing, like, some things just always fall on the same time, right? Like, in my industry, Christmas is in May and spring is in January. And so I'm creating florals right now for 2022 and that for spring, for Mother's Day. Thinking about seasons, I try to, put things like, gosh, it sounds so businessy, but to think in quarters, because then it's just smaller chunks I can manage. But in January, January is kind of a wash, so I don't put a lot of expectations on January because after the holidays, you're tired, you're in Rochester, you're hibernating in some level, or you're bracing yourself for February. So try not to put too much on January. And then September is always kind of like a new year to me, the beginning of school. That's kind of the real new year right now in my life.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I never really thought about that. Yeah, when you're working in kind of commercial art, you're working like 4 months ahead of trends and seasons. It has to be kind of a weird feeling.
It is, but you get used to it. And like I said, I can listen to Christmas music. That's fine. I actually I can stay in Christmas right now instead of doing some flowers, but I'll do some flowers. It'll be great.
That was my last question for you. I'll end by asking you, for any final thoughts, and where can people find you and your artwork?
Yeah, I am at watercolordevo.com. That's watercolor the American way, OR, and then Devo, DEVO. That's all one word. Unless you want to be adventurous and write AmarilysHenderson.com. Both will lead you to the same place. I do surface design. I paint in watercolor, but I also teach. And so the journey that I've kind of tried to guide people through, if you want to dabble and paint a lot of different things and just kind of sit down for 45 minutes at a time, then go to Skillshare. My profile is Skillshare/r/Amaryllis. And then beyond that, I have more in-depth courses on my app. So if you go to the App Store, look for Watercolor Devo, you'll find my courses there, or my app there. But I'm now doing something that's a little new to me, started in April of last year, where I have a membership that's all video. So if you feel comfortable with video and doing a little FaceTime, it's like doing short snippets of FaceTime to each other. I don't know if you've ever used the app Marco Polo. Mm-mm. So it's video messaging and you go,
I've heard of it now that you said that.
And so they developed this app where it's for coaching. And what I do is that on Mondays, we have a little hey, how are we doing? Just kind of art swings. How are we feeling? This is what we're going to talk about this week. And then by Wednesday, I post a little video of a little exercise. And it should take under half an hour. And then people show me with their camera, just like it's, FaceTime, show me what they've been doing. And sometimes I get little videos of, oh my goodness, I messed up this color. What should I do? And so it's a lot more of a mentored help than watching an online class and hoping, sink or swim. So it's been really fun. It's a very small community, just a dozen of us. And I'm really seeing people grow. So it's just rewarding. It's like just getting to have people kind of follow along with whatever I'm doing and my ramblings. And sometimes I'm in my robe and sometimes I look great because I just finished a class. So, it's a lot more personal, but yep. Go to the website. I think it's pretty easy to navigate. And if not, I am fairly responsive to email because I like to have a clean inbox. So I'm a little more approachable than maybe I should be. But it's fun. It's fun to hear real people and get messages on Instagram as well.
Well, thanks so much for your time this evening. I really appreciate it and getting to learn more about you and your journey. And it was a great conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks so much to Amarilys for that great conversation today. There were so many wonderful little nuggets in there. I hope each of you were able to take away something that can apply to your stage with your business or life, whatever you're going through right now. So you can find more stories like this on our website at rochesterrising.org. So take a few moments to check it out and learn more about the culture of entrepreneurship here in Rochester, Minnesota. So that's it for the podcast this week. We would really appreciate if you rate the podcast wherever you listen in and make sure that you're subscribed so that you never miss any of our podcasts coming out on Rochester Rising. And we'll see you here next Wednesday with a brand new show.